After shutting down the toxic fan base narrative, DeWanna took things even further. She called out something that WNBA fans had been noticing for months, a clear double standard in how certain fan bases are treated. Their passion has been reframed as hostility, their support has been twisted into toxicity, and every incident, whether it's a heated moment in a game or a viral social media debate, has been used to paint them as a problem. But now, the Fever are the biggest attraction in women's basketball, and it all started with Caitlin Clark. Clark didn't just bring talent to the Fever, she brought an entire movement with her.
So many players decided they were going to go to the Indiana Fever in the offseason, which was the death knell for a lot of those narratives. You know, they weren't traded. Cunningham was traded there, but Natasha Howard signed with the Indiana Fever. And I think more importantly, DeWanna Bonner signing with the Indiana Fever was representative of that.
But what no one expected was how her own wife would be at the center of the controversy. Bonner is married to Alyssa Thomas, a superstar for the Connecticut Sun. And just months before Bonner made her move to Indiana, Thomas made headlines for blasting Fever fans. And to make things even more dramatic, Bonner openly defended Indiana fans, completely contradicting Thomas's claim. This wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was real-life relationship drama playing out in the middle of a major WNBA controversy. And to make things even more dramatic, Bonner openly defended Indiana fans, completely contradicting Thomas's claim. This wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was real-life relationship drama playing out in the middle of a major WNBA controversy. Fans immediately picked up on the tension. How could Bonner, one of the league's most respected veterans, call Indiana's fan base passionate and welcoming, while her own wife had accused them of being hostile? Speculation began swirling. Did Bonner and Thomas disagree behind the scenes about what really happened? Fever fans didn't just support Caitlin Clark, they turned her into the most marketable star the league has ever seen. They made sure every Indiana game was a must-watch event. And now, players want to be part of it. The same people who once claimed nobody wants to play in Indiana are now watching top-tier talent willingly sign with the Fever. The same voices that criticized the fan base are now seeing sold-out arenas and record-breaking TV ratings. Therefore, the real question isn't whether the Fever are changing the WNBA, it's how far this movement will go. When Cheryl Swoopes made her bold claim about Indiana's fan base, it immediately fueled an already growing debate.
This WNBA offseason killed a lot of dumbass narratives, right? It really did. And I hope they're gone for good. And I hope we spend so much less time discussing nonsense. But I think we've seen it stamped out this offseason. And one of those narratives was people wouldn't want to go to the Fever because of the Fever fan.
Fever fans had been labeled toxic ever since Caitlin Clark arrived, with critics arguing that their passionate support bordered on hostility. She completely rejected the idea that Indiana's fan base was toxic, calling it one of the most passionate and engaged groups in the league. And just like that, the entire debate flipped on its head. Fever fans, who had spent weeks feeling vilified, saw Bonner's statement as validation.
DeWanna Bonner be an olive branch to us all to focus on the basketball. But I did think it was worth sharing simply because I know a lot of those fans, the new fans, felt rejected and beaten down a lot.
They rallied behind her, flooding social media with support. She had another point to make, one that exposed a major double standard in how WNBA fan bases are treated. After shutting down the toxic fan base narrative, DeWanna took things even further. She called out something that WNBA fans had been noticing for months, a clear double standard in how certain fan bases are treated. She pointed to the fact that players love playing in front of engaged, rowdy crowds. She reminded everyone that loud, passionate fan bases are the backbone of every successful sports league. And most importantly, she made it clear, Indiana's fans aren't the problem.
There's no time for it anymore.
It was a strong statement, one that only added fuel to the ongoing debate about Fever fans. And for many, it felt like confirmation that the toxicity narrative was real. But then, in a shocking twist, Bonner chose to sign with the Fever, the very team whose fan base her wife had just accused of racism. And to make things even more dramatic, Bonner openly defended Indiana fans, completely contradicting Thomas's claim. This wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was real-life relationship drama playing out in the middle of a major WNBA controversy. Because if Indiana Fever fans were truly so toxic, why were star players lining up to join the team? For months, critics had been pushing one idea. WNBA players didn't want to play in Indiana. They pointed to past struggles, small market disadvantages, and of course, the so-called toxic fan base. But then something happened that completely shattered that narrative. Star players didn't just choose to play for the Fever. They lined up to be part of what's being built in Indiana.
It was very clear that that potential for stardom, which she never had in her career, no matter how good she's been, outweighed any potential downsides of playing for the Fever.
It tapped into the long-running debate about how different players and teams are treated depending on who they are and where they play. And there was another layer to this. Bonner's comments tied directly into the ongoing conversation about media bias toward Caitlin Clark. The same voices criticizing Fever fans had also spent months picking apart Clark's every move. Whether it was her playing style, her attitude, or even her celebrations, Clark had been under a microscope since stepping into the WNBA. Bonner's words fueled the growing belief that something bigger was at play. That it wasn't just about Indiana, that it wasn't just about Clark, that there was a deliberate effort to control the narrative around the WNBA's biggest story. Because if Indiana Fever fans were truly so toxic, why were star players lining up to join the team? They all chose Indiana. They weren't avoiding it. They were embracing it. And this wasn't just about basketball. This was a power shift. For years, the WNBA's biggest free agent signings centered around teams like Las Vegas, New York, and Seattle. Those were the glamour destinations. The teams that got the big names, the big contracts, and the big TV ratings. Indiana, they weren't even in the conversation. But now, that's changed. Because suddenly, playing in Indiana isn't just about winning games. It's about being part of something historic. Caitlin Clark didn't just bring attention to the Fever. She made them the most watched team in the league. Indiana's games consistently pull in record viewership numbers. Their jersey sales are off the charts. Their arena is packed every single night. And here's the part the critics don't want to admit. Las Vegas Aces fans? Electric. New York Liberty fans? Dedicated. Chicago Sky fans? Intense. But when Indiana fans show up in full force, the narrative suddenly shifts to negativity.
Felt unwelcome as a result of that, because when you look at every sport and every fan base, there are going to be bad apples. With every group of people, there are. And the larger that group becomes, of course, then the larger the small percentage of bad apples are. But if you've ever followed sports, you see people acting stupid online or even live.
Bonner called it out. She pointed to the fact that players love playing in front of engaged, rowdy crowds. She reminded everyone that loud, passionate fan bases are the backbone of every successful sports league. And most importantly, she made it clear, Indiana's fans aren't the problem.
In my 11-year career, I've never experienced the racial comments from the Indiana Fever fan base. We had her face on a serious matter that happened in this world, and it's unacceptable, honestly. And there's no place for it, and we've been professional throughout the whole entire thing, but I've never been called the things that I've been called on social media, and there's no place for it. And basketball is headed in a great direction, but nah, we don't want fans that are going to degrade us and call us racial names. I mean, we already see what's happening in the world and what we have to deal with in that aspect. And we come to play basketball for our job, and it's fun, but we don't want to go to work every day and have social media blown up over things like that. It's
the way they came back the second game. It just makes you excited to, okay, I want to be a part of that. They didn't lay down and quit. They came back and actually try to beat us early, that next game. So it just shows a lot about their character and how hungry they are, and I want to be a part of that.
For weeks, the Indiana Fever fan base has been under attack. The narrative? They're toxic, hostile, and driving players away. Cheryl Swoopes even claimed that WNBA players wanted nothing to do with Indiana.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So you have players that are very significant on this Indiana Fever team that are like, I don't want to be here. That's where I want to be.
Yeah.
With one simple tweet, Bonner shut the conversation down. She completely rejected the idea that Indiana's fan base was toxic, calling it one of the most passionate and engaged groups in the league. And just like that, the entire debate flipped on its head. For weeks, the Indiana Fever fan base has been under attack. The narrative? They're toxic, hostile, and driving players away. Cheryl Swoopes even claimed that WNBA players wanted nothing to do with Indiana.
Like it's a lot. So you have players that are very significant on this Indiana Fever team that are like, I don't
want to be here.
That's what I want to be.
Yeah. Now listen,
there's a lot of
play more.
What kind of things you said?
I'm not in the locker room.
Okay. I'm
talking about more social media.
Okay.
But out of nowhere, a respected veteran, a WNBA champion, and a future Hall of Famer just shattered that claim with one tweet. And in doing so, she may have just turned the entire conversation on its head. When Cheryl Swoopes made her bold claim about Indiana's fan base, it immediately fueled an already growing debate.
This WNBA offseason killed a lot of dumbass narratives, right? It really did. And I hope they're gone for good.
Fever fans had been labeled toxic ever since Caitlin Clark arrived, with critics arguing that their passionate support bordered on hostility. And for a while, it seemed like that narrative was gaining traction. Media figures ran with the idea. Former WNBA players echoed it, and skeptics began to question whether Indiana Fever fans were crossing the line.
People on social media calling her every name under the sun because she chose to play in Indiana. These are the same people that are like, oh, she'll never play in Indiana for obvious reasons, and she went and defended the Indiana fans and was like, she was basically like, talking positively about the fans that were interacting with her positively, and was responding to one of the crazy posts about her being like, I'm getting screenshots of things you were saying about.
But then, DeWanna Bonner, a 5-time All-Star and 2-time WNBA champion, decided enough was enough. With one simple tweet, Bonner shut the conversation